Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of our small group discussion around our church-wide series, Freedom. And this week we're talking about freedom from failure, and I've asked the great and awesome Season Tingler high school pastor to join us today. Season, first off, tell the students that might not know you a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am so great that Nick doesn't even know my name. So it's Season Tingler, for those of you who didn't hear my friend Nick. I'm the high school and young adult pastor here at Vineyard, and I have a husband named Jared and a daughter named Elle and a tiny little dog who weighs 5 pounds named Dottie. And we just love spending time together, and we love this church, and we love sports. So when we're not at the church or with students, we're probably doing sports of some kind, or watching sports, or playing sports. So that's kind of our life. We just enjoy young people and spending time with young people and mentoring and coaching and all kinds of sports.
Awesome. So I'll pick up right there, because this week we're talking about failure, and part of the reason I asked Season to come this week and talk to us is because Season and I both struggle with the same thing, and that is perfectionism. And part of that comes from you being a competitive person.
Yes. So I think sometimes when you have a competitive spirit and it's just like hardwired in your DNA, that you just really want to be successful and you want to be the best, sometimes that can kind of come from being an athlete. But other times, being competitive can just bleed over into every area of your life if you're not careful. So I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist. I don't know where you stand,
I'm not.
Nick.
I'm not recovering whatsoever.
Okay, so he's willing to admit he's still in that place. I would like to say I recognize that God has not called us to be perfect in every area or any area of our lives. And so I'd like to say I'm recovering from that, if you will. But I've definitely struggled in my life with this idea of never wanting to fail at anything, or holding myself to this degree of wanting to do everything 150%. And I've had to learn that sometimes just that fear of not being able to be the very, very best at everything that I do can keep me from doing anything sometimes, which is not what God has for us.
Is there something that you can pinpoint in your life that you would say, oh, this is part of the reason why I struggle with that? I mean, is it just growing up in a competitive environment, playing softball, coaching, things like that? Is it something emotionally? Like, is there something you can pinpoint and say, hey, this is where I started with really struggling with this idea of perfectionism?
Yeah, so I really do think it all goes back to sports. There was something in me that just, I've always been a hard worker, and I've just never wanted to settle. And so I think I must have learned at a young age when it comes to sports that I wasn't naturally talented and just like super great at everything, or schoolwork. I'm not one of those people who was just extra smart and never had to study. And so I learned at a really young age that you have to put a lot of time and effort in to do well in sports and schoolwork. And so I also learned quickly that hard work can pay off, and often it does. And so I think sometimes we can totally just get obsessed with that, though. And you can even really hit like a low place whenever you realize that sometimes hard work doesn't pay off. Like sometimes you're going to fail. And the earlier you learn that in life, the better. I think sometimes you can learn it early on through experiences. If you've been given enough opportunities in anything, you have chances to fail. But there are sometimes I've seen young people or students who don't fail until they get to college, or they get their first like B when they get to college and they've used to straight A's, and they just freak out about it. So I've seen it both ways.
So talking about perfectionism, just for make sure that we're all clear, explain to me how perfectionism and failure, in your mind, how do those two connect? Because I don't want to make sure we're not talking about two separate ideas, but they're actually really closely connected. In your mind, how does that happen?
So I would say perfectionism is the belief that we are never supposed to fail at anything. So when you think of perfectionism, if that just bleeds into every area of your life, and you think about the fact that you're trying to do everything perfectly all the time and it's never an option to fall short, you're going to have a really skewed like idea of what failure is, when the truth is that failure is actually a really healthy thing. It actually builds character, and it actually helps us to grow and develops like perseverance in our character and to become better if we stick to it. But failure, if you're a perfectionist, can also cause you just to quit or like never even try again because you have this great fear of never meeting the expectation, or the fear of failure, I guess.
Sure. And that can be something that happens in our natural lives, just in the things that we try. It can also happen spiritually. We fail at something spiritually, and it just like, well, I failed. I want to put that somewhere else and not try that and not grow in that place. You were telling me a story earlier about a failure you experienced and how that fear of failure kept you from something. Tell our kids about that.
Yeah, so growing up, I really loved reading and spelling, and it was just kind of my thing. Like, I loved new words and vocabulary, and so in my school, like I'm sure some of you had the opportunity, or maybe you currently do right now, there was a spelling bee, and it's open for 5th through 8th graders. And you're all lumped together. So even if you're a 5th grader, you compete against 8th graders. It's just one big group. And so in 5th grade, I was so excited to get to finally go out for the spelling bee. Like, I had waited for a really long time to do that. And I actually ended up winning our school spelling bee. And so I beat all of these 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and won our spelling bee. And when you win that, you move on to like the county bee. And so then it's like students from other schools and in the area. And somehow I won that one too. And I moved on to the regional spelling bee. And so the regional spelling bee is the one where, I don't know if you guys have ever seen on TV in Washington, D.C., where they have all of the really super smart kids on stage spelling these huge words, and they put it on ESPN. So if you're to win the regional spelling bee, you get to go to Washington, D.C. for the national bee. And the regional spelling bee, I made it until there were only 3 seats left. And I misunderstood the word that they asked me to spell, and I didn't forget the word even. Do you want to know what it was?
Yeah, tell us the word. That was my next question.
Well, I thought she said reoccurs, and the word was actually recurs, R-E-C-U-R-S, which I know how to spell today. But the moral behind the story is I got 4th place, and so I missed going to the national spelling bee. And like, there was this huge, like, I remember the newspaper wanted to interview me, and like everyone thought that it was so exciting that I was this 5th grader that had even made it that far. And for me, all I felt was the failure of like letting all these people down, because I was representing my school and I was representing my area and even, you know, like our state. And so it just really felt like failure to me. And everyone's big question was like, are you so excited about like the potential of, you know, you have 3 more years, you could win it if you keep working hard. And instead of even going out the next year, I never went out for the spelling bee again, because that feeling of failing and not getting to that national bee for the first time was just too much. And so it kept me, that fear of never wanting to feel that failure again, it kept me from even trying to go or participating again. And I never forgot that. As an adult, I look back, you know, hearing students' stories and helping them through moments of failure. I think about the weight of what that meant to me at that time.
Yeah. And something that a lot of other people would look at and be like, hey, that was great success, great victory, and you just couldn't receive those moments of victory because you're still looking at the failure. Talk to us about what are some things that would fall in like that moral failure or that spiritual failure point.
Yeah, so I think anything that would be a spiritual failure would be something that happens that when we sin against God, and when we feel that weight of failing, like for example, whenever we tell a lie, and that lie can grow and grow and grow, and all of a sudden it can hit this place where everyone finds out about it, and we have to experience this feeling of maybe disappointment that we let God down and our parents down or whoever we told the lie to. And weight of that spiritual failure can be enough sometimes to say, I don't even know if I want to do this whole Christian thing. Like what I see with students oftentimes is they're like, well, I mean, I would be a church person or I would be a Christian, but it just seems like I'd be setting myself up to fail a lot because I'm definitely not perfect and I sin all the time. And so I'm not even going to try that. I'm not even going to go that route because they have a misunderstanding of who Christians are and what God has called us to be as far as followers of Him.
So something we've kind of talked about a lot over the last couple months in middle school ministry of just, the church is meant to be this place of the hospital, and you don't have to be perfect and completely whole to be here, but everyone's welcome, and the people that are the most messed up, Jesus says, I came for the sick, not for the well. And so even in our failures, we have this place at the table, and the people that Jesus hung out with were the people that lived in this place of, man, I fail, and I dropped the ball, but they're able to receive the freedom from failure. So transitioning to that, what is freedom from perfectionism, freedom from failure? Like, in your mind, what are some key elements that brings that freedom? That's a broad question, so go anywhere you want with it.
Yeah, well, I actually have so much experience in my recovery from perfectionism that I'm currently on in this journey. And so I have a couple statements that I feel like are mantras that when I feel myself really starting to get frustrated or even paralyzed in fear of not wanting to move because I don't want to make the wrong decision or do something wrong, I have a couple of things that I feel like God has really spoken to me that I remind myself or even recite out loud. I know that sounds silly, but there's just such power in verbally affirming who God is and who we are as children of God. And so the first one is just the fact that when I'm not feeling enough, so I know we all have lots of expectations of people around us, and we talked last week a lot about shame and guilt and who we are in Christ. And so we can constantly be trying to live up to the expectations of our parents and our teachers and our coaches. And, as you get older, you're a mom and you're a wife. And sometimes we can feel like I just can't be everything that everyone wants me to be. And so my mantra that I've really started saying is, instead of saying I am enough or am I enough, I say, God, you are enough. And so when I say that, I'm just acknowledging that in my shortcomings and in the places that I fall short or I fail, when I invite God into those places of my life, it's okay that I'm not enough because He is. So that's the first one. And the second one is I can't, but you can. And so, there are some times that I face things that are just way too big to tackle. There is absolutely no chance I could in my own power do them. And so I just have to stop and be reminded daily that I can't, but you can, God. And I just ask Him to give me His grace and His mercy to help me get through those things.
The other thing about this is forgiveness. This is a big part of this, and we don't have a ton of time to go into it, but it's worth mentioning. And it's a couple things. So first of all, understanding that our acceptance is not based on our success or failures. God loves us, and even when we mess up, we can still say, hey, I failed, let's try again, let's reset. And knowing that God is a God who is a forgiving God and forgives our messes up, our times we mess up, and forgives our failures, and doesn't hold those against us, but also for being able to forgive others when they fail, being a grace-centered place, because I think when we live a place of forgiveness, and we live a place where we're freely giving forgiveness, it opens us up to be able to receive forgiveness as well. And it's vice versa true. When we can receive forgiveness, we can also extend that a lot easier because we know the degree to which God forgives us. But one of the hardest areas is forgiving ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about, what does that look like? What does being able to forgive yourself or give yourself grace look like?
Yeah, I definitely think that as you speak about really receiving forgiveness for ourselves and then from that place being able to give it to others, that really resonates with me because I know that it can even affect your relationships, that fear of failing or wanting to be perfect and everything measuring up all the time. You can quickly push that onto other people. And so there's just such freedom in that recognition of saying, you know what, God, I'm never enough. Like, not in the big things or in the small things. Like, you are enough in all of those things. And I'm going to fall short. Like, there's just such boldness in being able to say that out loud and declare it and really receive it into your heart. And I think that the biggest thing about forgiveness and failure and where they come together is you can have the head knowledge that God forgives you, and you can understand how important it is to forgive yourself and be able to move forward in taking risks and trying again or picking yourself up. But until you've really received forgiveness into your heart and understand what God just has forgiven you of, it's going to be so difficult to give it to others. And so I believe that the pillar of forgiving others really begins with just receiving in your heart that Jesus forgives you. He forgives you daily. He forgives you hourly, by the minute. And when we truly experience the freedom from that, then we're able to give that to other people and have realistic expectations on other people and what kind of friends they should be, what kind of parents they should be even. Sometimes I think we can just have really unrealistic expectations of other people if we have unrealistic expectations of ourselves.
Right. And one of the things, I talk about this a lot because it's important to me, but one of the things when Kyron was a baby, the song I used to sing over him was, I'm so proud of you, I'm so proud of you, I'm so proud of you. Kyron, I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you when you're sleeping, I'm proud of you when you're awake. No matter what happens, just keep trying, because learning means making mistakes. And it's wanting to raise my son in this culture where he just knows that it's all right to fail. And it's all right, like, failure doesn't define us, and it doesn't make us who we are. And with Jesus, he's just saying, yeah, you're going to fail. You're going to mess up. And Paul, when he's writing Galatians, is this thing of, hey, you're trying to set yourself up to this huge benchmark of being perfect and doing everything right. And you're going to mess up and you're going to fail. And there's this freedom here in this place. Like you're talking about just being able to say, you know what, God, you're enough and I'll never be enough. And that's okay. And a lot of times it's expectations that maybe other people put on us and we don't even put on ourselves, like you were talking about, parenting is a huge one. There's all sorts of, well, you can't feed your kid this, and if you don't do this right, and you don't do this at this age, then you're missing all these marks. But I think as a teenager, there's a lot of that too. And I'm sure you've seen that working with athletes and things like that. If, you're not an all-state this, and if you're not a A+ student here, then you just haven't measured up. And what Paul's saying is none of that really matters to God. But we've given ourselves completely to God, and that's what matters. Yeah. So any last thoughts that you want to share with our students before we sign off?
I think the best way really to sum it up is that there's just this balance of between throwing the towel in and just saying, oh, well, I'm never going to be enough anyway, so why do I try at anything? And trying so hard that we're always doing it out of ourselves instead of allowing God to work through us. And I think that fine line that we walk has to be just submitting everything that we do and every ounce of energy that we put into trying to the Lord. And I think that's the sweet spot where we don't get off the hook and say, well, nothing I do in life really matters, so there's no point even trying anyway. But it's mostly like when God tells us, I believe it's Colossians 3:23. If it's not, go ahead and take that out. I believe in Colossians 3:23, it says, and whatever you do, work with all your heart as if you're working for the Lord and not for man. And I think that's really the sweet spot that ties it all together, that says, whatever you do, submit it to the Lord. He gets the glory. He's the one who gives you the grace to even accomplish anything in the first place. And when you fall short, he's going to be the one who's there to pick you up. So I try to remind myself of that, and I think it's just a great reminder for anyone who is struggling in that place of just wanting to throw the towel in and be like, well, nothing matters anyway. I just quit. I'm never going to be good enough. Or try so hard to meet the expectations of other people or even God and their relationship with God. Just being reminded of that.
Great. All right, guys. Season Tingler, high school pastor, 8th graders, get to know her. If you see her about, go up to her, give her a big hug. She loves hugs. And we'll talk to you guys soon.